Thank you, Brian.
Our next speaker is Associated Medical Schools of New York, and from there we will be hearing from Russ A. Fromer, Vice President of Governmental and Community Affairs, Associate Dean, Columbia University Medical Center. So we met earlier today, and so it's great to have you up front. So,
thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm here to argue or to urge the legislature to include $50 million for the New York First program, the New York Fund for Innovation in Research and Scientific Talent. New York First will help New York's medical schools recruit and retain the top scientific and research talent in the country and, in fact, the world. That $50 million will be matched 2-to-1 for a total investment of $150 million by the 16 medical schools across the state. Many of you may be familiar with the old faculty development program from NYSTAR. That was an enormously successful program which showed a return of at least 7-to-1 on state investment, on their investments in recruiting and retaining faculty members at research institutions. New York First will expand and improve upon the FDP, and it is important because we are seeing more and more as other states are investing millions, if not billions, in recruiting and retaining, in fact, poaching top scientific talent from New York. Further details about the New York First program are attached in the back of my testimony, but what I really wanted to do here today is to tell you another story of why this program is so important for New York State. Last year, I came before this committee and told you of Dr. Rudy Leibel, a faculty member at Columbia, who, after receiving an FDP grant, chose to continue his career doing diabetes and obesity research in New York. This year, I'd like to tell you the story of another fantastic example of a scientist who is doing great work in New York, Angela Cristiano. Dr. Angela Cristiano is a professor of dermatology and genetics at Columbia. Her work focuses on genetics and cell biology of skin and hair disease, and she and her colleagues are trying to find basic ways to prevent, treat, and someday hopefully cure various skin and hair conditions. Last month, we had the honor of hosting Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul as she had a chance to meet Dr. Cristiano and see her very impressive work up close. After completing her PhD, Dr. Cristiano came to Columbia in 1995 to begin her research career. Very early on, she made several important breakthroughs and published important and well-regarded papers in many of the most prestigious scientific journals. As you might expect with someone who has such great success, the offers started coming in, and schools across the country tried to take her away from Columbia. In 2006, an out-of-state institution made her a very attractive offer that was almost too good to pass up. But in the end, Columbia was able to convince her to stay. The primary reason we were able to do so was because of an FDP grant from NYSTAR. The NYSTAR grant was for roughly $250,000 a year for 3 years for a total investment of $750,000. Since that time, Dr. Cristiano has received over $25 million in federal grant support and other funding. Today, Dr. Cristiano is responsible for 50 good-paying jobs, and this does not include general campus support jobs like maintenance, security, and animal care, which her lab indirectly supports. These jobs not only offer good salary, but benefits such as retirement, health, and even educational benefits for families and children. The kind of benefits that allow families not only to support themselves, but in fact move up the economic ladder and build strong communities. So in 2006, the state invested $750,000 in Dr. Cristiano. She used that money to hire additional staff and purchase equipment. She did not use it to increase her own salary. All of the state money went to creating new jobs and making large equipment purchases. So after 10 years, the return on the state investment is 35-to-1 and counting. My back-of-the-envelope calculations show that just this New York State income tax revenue from the employees in Dr. Cristiano's lab is north of $150,000 per year. One of the other requirements of the original FDP grant was a proven track record in technology transfer. She has excelled in this area as well. Since receiving the FDP grant, she has filed 35 invention disclosures and received 26 patents. She has also started 3 companies. I remind you that the original grant was a retention grant. If not for it, by definition, all of her work, all of the grant, all of the jobs would be occurring out of state. I submit that we want more scientists like Angela Cristiano coming, not leaving New York, And programs like FDP, like New York First, can make this happen. Of the 52 FDP grant recipients, 80% are still doing science in New York long after their grant expired. And I will note that this is all around the state. Upstate, downstate, SUNY's, private. The leading recipients were not only Columbia, but Cornell, as well as SUNY Buffalo and SUNY Stony Brook. So in closing, I just ask you to support New York First in this year's budget. And I will note that Commissioner Zemsky made two important points. One is the importance of leveraging federal grant funding from the NIH, National Institutes of Health. This program will do that very well because it is the scientists, the star researchers who will come in with the federal research funding. He also talked about the importance of the state's universities. Well, that importance lies in the faculty members who do the research. Thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Senator Krueger.
Thank you for coming to testify today. So, are these medical school research projects not eligible to apply for funds through other EDC programs or the Regional Economic Development Councils?
I can only speak to New York. We have looked into it before. When the REDC first came, there was not a lot of interest in pursuing this. I can only say that my personal experience. I cannot speak for what other people experience, but I did not see a lot of interest there.
Because look, I have all kinds of questions about our models for economic development, but one theory was that sort of broadening the definitions of who could be eligible would actually mean less individual programs, but a greater amount of money for those people who really could show the win to apply for. And I think that year in, year out, you come and you testify or meet with us and show real wins in medical research investments. So you actually think the state's total investment in science and medical research has actually gone down since we stopped funding a specific program?
Well, certainly the FDP existed from 2003 roughly to 2009, 2010, I forget. There was $650,000 in the budget from 2 years ago. There was nothing in last year's budget.
Thank you.
May I just note that we've been joined by Senator Golden. Senator Golden has been a real champion of the faculty development program, the New York First program. Thank you for your support.
Thank you very much. And now I don't have to introduce Senator Golden, so thank you for doing that on my behalf.
I didn't say his first name.
Marty Golden.
Thank you. We've been joined by Assemblywoman Richardson.
Any questions?
Any questions?
We're very pleased that you could participate today. Very excellent testimony. Look forward to working with you in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Our next speaker.
Did you join the dinner at Coogan's tonight?
Not tonight, but too often.
Okay.
Our next speaker is President Jan Chesterson, New York State Hospitality and Tourism Association. Welcome. Glad to have you here today. Ready when you are.
Thank you. Again, my name is Jan Chesterton, and I'm the president of the New York State Hospitality and Tourism Association, and I also serve as the administrator of the Tourism Industry Coalition of New York State. I'd like to thank Chairs Farrell and Young and all the members of the legislature here today for allowing me to testify, specifically as it relates to the review of the tourism programs within the 2016-17 executive budget proposal. Our organization is the oldest lodging association in the country, founded in Saratoga Springs in 1887. We have nearly 1,300 members of the lodging and attraction industry, representing about 125,000 sleeping rooms across the state. The hospitality and tourism industry has recently experienced tremendous growth, which is unparalleled, a combination of creating and maintaining jobs, as well as providing the state with its return on investment. In December, early indications showed that for the first time in history, the economic impact of tourism in New York is up 15% in the last 5 years. New York State welcomed over 227 million visitors, growing 12% since 2011, including 11.7 million international visitors. New York hosted nearly 1/3 of all overseas visitors to the U.S., the highest of any other state. The spending of these visitors generated $101 billion in total spending, generating $7.8 billion in state and local taxes combined, and that equates to saving each New York State household on average of $962 in taxes. In return, this sustained 867,000 jobs, with total wages topping $31.6 billion in wages, making tourism the state's fourth largest employer. 1 in every 12 jobs is sustained by tourism. Given these kinds of returns as a revenue source, tourism is not only a wise investment, but a critical one for New York's economy. To that end, we are requesting funding mechanisms for the I Love New York, Market New York, and Taste New York programs are at least maintained as provided in the Governor's 2016-17 executive budget proposal. We also request that at least $5 million be allocated to the matching grants program in the upcoming fiscal year. In asking this, we'd like to thank the legislature for providing an additional $500,000 to matching grants in last year's enacted budget. The increased allocation to a total of $4.3 million played a critical role at the local levels for the tourism-related projects, providing $5 million, $1.2 million above the proposed, in the 2016-17 budget, not only builds on the past successes, but puts the program funding back in line with that which it was in 2008. In December, also the state awarded $17.6 million in tourism-related projects, which we've already heard about, through the round 5 of the Regional Economic Development Council process. We remain an ardent supporter of this process, as they've been providing funding sources for tourism and promotion and marketing across the state. As we move forward, we strongly support round 6. All of these funding mechanisms from the governor and the legislature are critical so that the industry, along with the state and local partners, can continue to flourish. In his 2016-17 executive budget proposal, as you have heard, the governor has proposed a statewide minimum wage increase of $15 per hour by 2018 in New York City and by 2021 for the rest of the state. In New York State, if the minimum wage is raised at all, the law requires that a wage board be called regarding the minimum wage of food service workers. And therefore, if an increase in statewide minimum wage happens this year, something our association opposes, a wage board would subsequently be called for food service workers. We support the Restaurant Association and our other partners in the efforts to obtain a 5-year freeze on any new wage board being called if the minimum wage is raised. On top of all of the newest increases in both minimum wage to $9 and an increase in the service workers' cash wage of $7.50, which at this point is only 4 weeks old. While as an industry we support fair minimum wage, it's important to note that such increases our members tell us negatively impact job creation and expansion of businesses across the state. We continue to be encouraged by the governor's commitment to tourism. After all, it's the marketing and promotion that has brought the visitors back, and it's incumbent upon the state to ensure that the tourism industry remains a powerful one. While the tourism matching grants and the I Love New York programs are funded through the annual state budget and always will be needed, we believe that they're only part of the solution, and we continue to effectively market the attractions and destinations that New York has to offer. So that is why I'm pleased to testify before you today and offer our association as a resource and a partner in maximizing the industry's impact on the state's economy. Thank you for the opportunity, and I will take any questions that aren't too hard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any on our side? Just one quick one. Senator Kruger, and then I have a quick one.
Thank you. Do you break down your data by region of New York?
Yes, ma'am.
So perhaps we could get that after the hearing.
Absolutely.
I actually feel like all of the increases in my district. It's sort of
I actually have a synopsis of it here by jobs, wages, by county.
We love tourists, but sometimes we think there are too many on our sidewalks at any given moment.
And that's a bad thing.
Well, it's a dilemma. We have somebody in the audience going,
Maybe, maybe
Thank
not.
you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody on the assembly? I just had one question. The new chair of the Tourism Committee in the Senate is Senator Rich Funke, and he's very interested in possibly taking a look at reviving the Empire State Games, and that he feels that it would be very, very good to get that going again because of the tourism aspect. Could you give your perspective on that? Was that beneficial when the games were operating?
I'm not sure I'm the right person to ask that question of. We've had preliminary meetings, and he has mentioned that. I'm not that familiar with, I don't know if I've been around that long, and I'm not that sure how that they were handled or what agency of the state I believe that would have handled it.
Right.
I know the team in place now at I Love New York handles most of the state festivals and events, so that would probably be a resource that I would look to see how it's handled and how it was in the past.
Right, and how it attracted people to New York State. So thank you. Thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Our next speaker is Jen O'Connor, New York State Director, Ready Nation, Council for a Stronger America.
Is this a Trump thing? No? Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am the New York State Director of a national nonprofit called Council for a Strong America. It is an umbrella organization that leverages the voices of unique messengers around proven investments in children and families. So we represent law enforcement, retired military, and business leaders. I'm here today to talk on behalf of Ready Nation, which is our business leader organization. As employers, our members are supportive of a range of college and career readiness initiatives designed to close the job skills gap, such as career and technical education, P-TECH, multiple pathways to a diploma. We hope that you will work across budget tables this year with the Education Committee to ensure that those initiatives are adequately funded. It is only with appropriate funding that they will be able to offer access to the many young people who might benefit from them and go on to become successful employees, contributing to the economy. However, today I want to talk to you about something a little different. I want to address my comments to the issue of high-quality childcare, which is something that hasn't been brought up at this hearing today. But someone earlier did mention barriers to employment and barriers to economic development, and the lack of childcare would be one of those. I'll give you a little bit of background. Every dollar in New York State that is invested in early learning programs generates a total of $1.86 in sales of local goods and services. That's as much or more economic activity than investments in all other economic sectors. So that's more than manufacturing, construction, and transportation. And it's money that stays in local communities. I urge you to keep that in mind as you work with your colleagues on economic development strategies across New York State. But I wanted to talk about childcare as small business. Under the Child Care and Development Block Grant, child care providers must now be checked against a variety of databases. We're talking about background checks, fingerprinting. These are all very good regulations. But the new regulation means that more than 220,000 providers, as well as household members over the age of 18, will be required to have a background check at a cost of over $100 per person. That doesn't seem like a lot, but most of these child care providers and their employees are low-wage workers. Therefore, nearly 12,500 small businesses and their employees will bear the financial burden of these clearances if funding is not included in the state budget. Low-wage workers will be burdened by these costs, and in worst-case scenarios, small businesses across the state will be forced to close. You have demonstrated that you care deeply about economic development and bringing businesses to our state. There must be a strong workforce to support your initiatives. Employers and employees are parents, and parents cannot work without childcare. So we've spent a day talking about, or a number of hours, talking about bringing and sustaining, maintaining businesses. That's an untenable situation without childcare. So specifically, we would urge you this year to allocate $24 to $28 million in economic development funds so that the costs of background clearances for childcare providers are not passed down to low-wage workers and small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Savino has a question.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Senator Young. Thank you for your testimony, Jen. I'm glad you raised the issue about childcare as part of economic development. It's something I've been saying for several years now, which should be part of our economic development program, because access to safe, affordable, quality childcare keeps women in the workforce. It's good for business, it's good for women, it's good for families. You know, and in the past, I've been somewhat critical of the idea of us providing the money for the background checks, because I was thinking mostly of the idea that the SCR clearance is about $25, and that's not outrageous. But you're right, we have now added a whole bunch of other background checks, which for a person who's applying for a job that makes on average, what does a child care worker earn on average?
I mean, we're looking at people who sometimes make as low as $16,000 a year.
16.
And are eligible for child care subsidies themselves.
Right, so, you know, laying out $100 for background checks is a kind of a large amount of money. So,
Yeah. We're also, Senator, we're also looking at a workforce that has like a 20% turnover because people are paid so horribly. So for a provider to pick up that $100 a person, if you're hiring and rehiring, that's going to add up.
and I know earlier today, E.J. McMahon testified at the tax committee hearing, and this is not the first time he testified before the budget committee. The first day, I think it was on just general government issues. He talked then, and he also spoke today, interestingly enough, about the effect of the minimum wage on child care workers. That because they are, some of them are private, they run, you know, family-run daycare centers, and their money doesn't really come from, it's not private pay. It's, for the most part, it's subsidized child care. So those subsidies have not risen in years. And so they're more of a conduit for public money, and how are they supposed to meet the demands of the higher minimum wage? Have you guys looked at that?
Yeah, and we haven't specifically spoken to the minimum wage because these workers are in a whole different place than, say, someone working at McDonald's is. If you start to pay, and we're completely, you know, as a child development advocate, I would say that I'm completely in favor, but for this workforce, there really needs to be a career ladder. These are folks who, if you suddenly increase them to $15 an hour, then everyone's pay has to go up. And it should, but it would need to be rolled in over time. And I do think that because subsidy dollars haven't risen in so many years, then you're looking at passing those costs of paying minimum wage onto parents. So your cost of childcare actually goes up. We base the cost of childcare now on what parents are basically willing to pay, not on what it actually costs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator. Sure.
Thank you.
Any assembly?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Our next speaker and final speaker is Scott Wexler, Executive Director, Empire State Restaurant and Tavern Association. To close, as Assemblyman says.
So I'm the last speaker.
Not least.
It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. What's wrong with this process? Thank you. And it'll probably please you that I do not intend to read my testimony that we have submitted. I just wanted to make some brief comments. I understand a number of speakers have already addressed the minimum wage issue, and that, in effect, I'm sure it won't surprise you, is the most important issue facing our members in this year's executive budget. I'm submitting testimony to the workforce development hearing tomorrow. I've attached that testimony for you. But I came here to talk about the idea that the governor put forward about having offsets that would help business deal with some of the cost increases from his proposed minimum wage increase. I said before, a number of us have said it, at least as what was proposed by the governor, the offsets he's put forward don't come anywhere close to covering the costs or even helping us meet the costs. But there were some promises in the governor's State of the State message of some initiatives to come that could be helpful. And in particular, the State Liquor Authority Chairman's Working Group on ABC reform has been tasked with making recommendations and for modernizing and reforming the alcohol beverage control law. This group is expected to complete its work and issue a report with recommendations at its next meeting on March 2nd. Several of these recommendations will be helpful to our members, including proposals to permit Sunday morning sales in restaurants and taverns, to provide the SLA flexibility to grant licenses that would be within 200 feet of a school or place of worship, to reorganize the existing alcohol beverage control law in an easier to use manner, and to examine the laws governing the buying and selling of liquor and wine by wholesalers to retailers, a very expensive cost factor to us. But this working group didn't emerge out of thin air. When I began representing this association more than 30 years ago, State Senator Roy Goodman had already issued a report explaining ways the alcohol beverage control law was antiquated and calling for the recodification of the law to bring it up to date. That was in 1981. A number of legislators have helped carry this mantle over the years, although none has worked harder and frankly been more successful and been a stronger advocate for us than Chairman Schimminger. He succeeded in passing, yes, he is a good, amongst many good representatives. But Chairman Schimminger succeeded in passing legislation to get the review process started in 2007. He, along with his colleague Senator Alisi in the Senate, sponsored legislation that called for the Law Review Commission to study the law. They had a deliberative process, took about 2 years, involved a lot of stakeholders, and they issued a report in 2009. And I was in this room before a panel, actually separately, of hearings of the Senate and the Assembly to talk about those recommendations. I'm not quite sure what happened since then, but this year the governor embraced ABC reform. And now we have a real opportunity to get it done. So I came here today to call your attention to it, but most importantly to thank you. Thank you for all the work you, the members of the legislature, have done, your staffs have done, including your central staff over the years, to get us to this place. The proposed changes that we support and others, and this report, by the way, is reported by consensus. Nothing is going to end up being recommended that the whole group can't live with, which is very difficult to do in our industry. But these ideas are even more important in a context where we're talking about imposing higher cost mandates in the form of minimum wage on our members. We need to examine those ideas in this context. We look forward to working with you on them. We do expect a robust discussion about them. But that is something that we look forward to. Again, we thank you for your time, your attention, and we look forward to crossing the finish line, hopefully, later this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Savino has a question, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. I want to delve into the tip wage issue. I noticed that, I read the testimony while you were speaking, so I know the issue of the largest increase going from what is it, $5.50 to $7.50. Some of the larger restaurants, though, particularly in Manhattan, are moving away from the entire tip wage issue as a way to resolve this. So they see it as a two-step process. They are eliminating the issue of having to account for this and pay the higher tip wage, bringing everybody up to the minimum wage, and so it provides a benefit to the back of the house as well, where they have a problem attracting cooks and sous chefs and all the back of the house employees. And so they're pooling this. They're creating, they're eliminating tips, and they're putting a gratuity on the check, and they are then sharing the money with everybody except for, I think, dishwashers and somebody else. So do you see that as a continuing trend?
What we see in the industry, and in fact as minimum wages have been raised in some other local jurisdictions, Seattle, Los Angeles, and others, individual proprietors have begun changing their methodology. Across the nation, I'd say it's at its very beginning. Most of our servers object to it. As a matter of fact, during the wage board hearings last year, where they eventually made the recommendation to raise the tipped minimum wage, many servers testified to leave the system alone because they were doing quite well. At the end of the day, I've seen some recent consumer research which tells me that the idea to eliminate tipping is likely not to be successful. Overwhelmingly, Americans like the tipping system. They also support higher wages for our workers, and it is, I'm going to be honest and say it's really a dichotomy for owners, because we also know that our customers don't like seeing the menu prices go up. The customers like what they like, and they don't like what they don't like. So I don't think tipping is, I think we're going to see more of restaurants eliminating tipping, but it will mostly be restaurateurs like Danny Meyer,
Right.
who are destination establishments and very high price tag, high check averages. But by the same token, if you do look at my testimony that I submitted for tomorrow, we're also looking at the other end. One of the things that was quite informative to us during the wage board process was to understand how in a segment of our industry, and I'm not going to, but in the low wage, in the low check segment of our industry, where the tip workers are really making very low tips, the data does indicate that the tip wage system is not providing for them the same opportunity it's providing for our member establishments. I mean, my members, independent restaurants and taverns, $15, $25 an hour with tips is standard, and the high, in the better, the higher check places, they make much more. And so we talked to the wage board. They adopted it, but the commissioner rejected it. Perhaps looking at a way that we can adjust the tip wage in a way that would protect those tip workers who are making $15, $20, $30 an hour, but also not trap those low wage workers in a wage that is literally just pennies above the minimum, whatever the minimum is. We have that in the miscellaneous industry workers, folks who, for example, car washes and others. You have a low tip and a high tip level job, and you have to make a certain minimum amount of tips in order to qualify. Those workers actually are making less in a minimum wage today than tip restaurant workers, and I assume that as you sort through the minimum wage issue, whether it's part of the budget or a separate legislation, you'll come to some commonality and understanding, and hopefully we'll all end up in a better place.
But if I recall, if we raise the minimum wage, it automatically triggers a wage board for the tip wage workers, doesn't it?
That's correct. If you adopt the governor's proposal as written and make no other or any other increase in the minimum wage, a wage board would be required to be held within 6 months, and the labor commissioner would decide what the minimum wage would be for those workers.
It's important that we keep that in mind. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Assembly members? Senator Kruger?
Thank you, Scott. So with tip wage issues, what about all the staff who don't receive tips? They're the, it's sexist, so the bus people.
Well, we call them the back of the house typically. As Senator Safino was talking about, the cooks, the dishwashers, they are precluded by federal and state law from participating in the tip system.
But they are under the what wage level now?
They are under the regular minimum wage law.
They're under regular.
So they are required to pay whatever the minimum wage. By the way, if you'll allow me, Senator, tip workers in the restaurant industry must make at least the minimum wage with tips. We just do know there is some wage theft, unfortunately, in the industry. Not all of the owners follow the law the way I would hope our members do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for participating today. So that ends the hearing. We do have, unless there's any other business? Okay. So we do have 2 hearings tomorrow, mental hygiene and workforce development. Look forward to seeing my colleagues then, and thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your leadership.